Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who is holding on for dear life to see where Elon takes Twitter, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. My name is Sean Callanan, and welcome to episode 342 of Sports Geek. On this week's CEO Series episode, I chat with Martin Anayi from the United Rugby Championship. Thank you very much for listening. You might be doing so at sportsgeekhq.com, or you can be listening on your favourite podcast platform. That might be Pocket Cast, my one, might be Apple, it might be Spotify. Really do appreciate listeners from around the world. As always, you can contact me via social media at Sean Callanan on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn and the like, or at SportsGeek on most channels. Please reach out, and you can always do so via email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. Really hope you enjoy the chat with Martin. I really had a good chat with him. He is the CEO of the United Rugby Championship, URC, as it is known, as we discuss it. So enjoy this chat with Martin Anayi. Very happy to welcome Martin Anayi. I think I got the name right, and I hope I got it right. He is the CEO of United Rugby Championship. Martin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you got it pretty good. Thanks very much for having me on.
No problems. As I normally do in sort of starting off with guests, before jumping into your current role, I love to learn how people got into the world of sport. How did you get your start in the world of the sports business?
Yeah, good question. I like many, I think, actually, by the sounds of it, and LinkedIn, this is a pretty big alumni, but I started at IMG. Yep. It's now WME IMG. And I started there as a lawyer. So actually prior to that, I'd looked at internships out of school and did a summer. I think it was a week, actually. I wouldn't say a summer. So it gets longer every time I recount the story, I think. So and was introduced to TWI, if you remember that, was a sort of media arm. Yep. And IMG. Got introduced to this amazing chap called Mark McCormack, who set up IMG. And then through various different places, he had written a book, What They Don't Teach You at Harvard, business school, law school. I found out that he was a lawyer and just thought that was quite a cool route to go. And sort of took it from there. I went and qualified as a lawyer and did some private practice in the city of London. Always aimed really with the kind of view that I'd love to get back to sports and sport law. And was lucky enough to get given that role in 2007-8, I think. So became a lawyer at IMG at that point and sort of just developed the career from there.
So just sort of worked your way through the different facets of sports law, whether they be, collective bargaining agreements, event agreements, looking at all of that side of the business. And then you sort of, from there, worked your way into the IMG Motorsport side of the business?
Yeah, so actually really from private practice, I knew that I wanted to get into the sports world. So it was all contractual work. It was all corporate work, because there's a lot of merger acquisitions, a lot of IP. So I was really interested in kind of how trademarks work, copyright, patents, design rights, and was sort of overreaching slightly in my private practice because they could see how desperate I was to do sports and bring sporting clients in. And they were brilliant, my first law firm. So I was really keen to sort of educate myself before going into somewhere like IMG, because when you hit the ground in IMG, it is baptism of fire. You're in with some of the heavyweights of the sports world, both on the media side and, kind of events and sponsorship side. I was an events and federations lawyer, so I was working from everything from motorsport over here, Formula One, athlete representation. I was even doing licensing. It's got a huge licensing program, or had. And then quite a lot of rugby. So it was Rugby World Cup. So just touching almost every sport I would have done contracts for, World Golf Championship. I would have done the RNA Open Championship golf contracts. I would have done Wimbledon contracts, was a big client of theirs. So it was the best and most sort of scary at the same time experiences, because you're thrown into the deep end. But you touch a whole bunch of different areas of sport, and it was amazing. It was an unbelievable education.
And obviously, the law is your background, but then getting access to all of those documents and contracts, they are effectively the recipes of how that business is work, or how that sponsorship is going to work, and the negotiation around all of the clauses that are there. And we've also, a lot of people who are listening have probably seen the documents or passed them through a lawyer. But did you start finding a deep understanding of the world of sport via all of those contracts?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, more brutal than that, people like Ian Todd, who really sort of almost set up IMG with McCormack out of London, were starting to say, well, you're getting quite expensive. You need to come and make us money now. So I didn't really have a choice at that stage. And that was quite a common career path at IMG. You'd have lawyers and accountants and sales. Those were kind of three different arms at that point. I'm sure they're different routes now. But if you're a really great salesman and salesperson, if you're great at the legal side but quite business orientated, or you're quite financial but commercial, you tended to be moved across to what they call the business side.
Yep.
And go and make some money for the business rather than costing them money. So it was a great experience. But I knew quite early that actually that was a grounding for me, the law. What I really wanted to do was go and generate revenue and get involved with sport on the business side more broadly. So getting involved earlier at deal stage. And as soon as I started to do that across Rugby World Cup and others, post the Rugby World Cup actually in 2011, I had the opportunity to go into the motorsport division, manage some Formula One drivers and former Formula One drivers, and then also develop out that business. So looking at acquisitions and I was lucky enough to set up a world championship with the FIA. So, I was a little bit pushed, but also drawn to it because I knew that was a bit more interesting probably for me in the long run.
And, being in that role, sort of that MD role for World Rallycross, again, stepping away as much from the contract side, but you're now looking at the total business. What was the learning curve in sort of, driving things for World Rallycross? Yeah,
because it was actually, we went to the FIA and who are the governing body of four-wheel motorsport. And we were already a partner of theirs on what's called World Speedway. I think actually
yep.
you guys we had an event down in Australia. So, we were quite keen to move into four-wheel motorsport with the governing body. But there were only four at that stage world championships, Formula One being the most high profile, obviously. They were asking us to look at World Rally at that point because it was before Red Bull came in to look at World Rally. They were looking at different iterations and different disciplines in motorsport. The one at that time was actually Formula E. They were very keen for us to invest in and be part of Formula E. And we actually turned around and looked at it from a broadcast point of view and said, there's this little motorsport called the FIA European Rallycross Championship. It was cool little cars. They were faster than Formula One cars, 0 to 100. They looked like your road cars, and they did jumps and skid round corners, and they had Travis Pastrana racing, and
yep.
Ken Block at that point had released Gymkhana. So it was sort of culturally cool. We already owned Formula Drift out in the States, so we kind of liked this sort of counterculture that it could have brought. It was just a bit cooler as a motorsport.
Yep.
And they gave us the opportunity to turn that into World Championship. So again, real deep end. I was having to sign teams from scratch, drivers, promoters. I had to set up a schedule. I had to create a World Championship, so I had to be on 3 continents. And all in the meantime, having to run a very professional motorsport business. was also quite new to me as well. So I was learning a lot about cars at that point. And it was just at that sort of inflection point where actually from a battery powered car, these were going to be the future, because you could at that point run a full race on a battery. So we knew that when the EV sort of technology was coming in, that actually these cars that looked like road cars, that was quite a good platform for them. So that's what we did. We sort of focused all our attention and created something pretty cool. It's just clicked over 1.2 million followers on Facebook, and it's only a few years old, and it's just a cool little motorsport, and it's got a great future, I think. Terrific.
And so then in 2015, you came across to the United Rugby Championship. It wasn't known as that then. Do you want to give a bit of a background of the United Rugby Championship, what it is now, and the history? Because there might be people that know some of the former names and now know what it is now.
Sure. Yeah, actually, at the time it was called Pro12. So there are three main leagues, rugby union leagues in Europe. There's a big French league called the Top 14. There's the English Premiership, and then there's effectively everybody else. And I was the everybody else. I was the best teams in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, now South Africa and Italy, but it wasn't there. We added South Africa relatively recently. So we play in a competition that is domestic league, although it's cross-border. That was the Pro12. That's now the URC, or United Rugby Championship. And then our cup competition, that's what everybody would have known, the Heineken Cup or the Champions Cup. So there are two sort of different competitions running in parallel within the European rugby scene. And we own 100% of the United Rugby Championship, and then we own 1/3 of the cup. So we own 1/3 of the Champions Cup and Challenge Cup. And we own that alongside the French League and the English League. Okay. So we're business partners. I guess the equivalence in the Southern Hemisphere is Super Rugby. Yep. Is the sort of pinnacle club competition, provincial championship. We have big sort of name teams, for those who know rugby, like Leinster from the Dublin area. Actually, it's 12 counties of Leinster, but they play out of Dublin. Munster, Ulster. So we have big city teams. We have Cardiff, we have Glasgow, Edinburgh. And then we were lucky enough 2 years ago to expand the league with South African teams coming in. They actually left Super Rugby. So that's the Stormers, the Sharks, Lions and Bulls. And they came into our competition. So at that point, we called it the URC, or United Rugby Championship. And it's going really well. Like, we've broken records last couple of years, both years of URC 1, URC 2. From a broadcast point of view, social media growth is fantastic. We've gone over 10,000 average seat, tickets per game, attendance. So yeah, a lot of healthy metrics showing that post-COVID, people are coming back and loving their rugby.
And how important was to change the mix and bring in those South African teams to again expand to another continent, but not just be European?
Yeah, it's a big move, right? It's a big move because, I guess at the point where we were in COVID, we could have either sort of shrunk within ourselves and gone smaller and gone back to a Celtic league almost. Yep. Or we looked the alternative. We looked to expand our horizons. A lot of discussion in rugby union has been around the South African teams playing their domestic rugby, if you like, their week in, week out rugby in the Northern Hemisphere because of time zones. Yep. And Super Rugby was really challenging for South African teams because they were going to Buenos Aires one week, Christchurch another week, back to Sydney, and then up to Japan as well at that point. So it was very, very tough, I think, for the South African teams to really be competitive all the way through that competition. Whereas now they're playing one hour time zone difference. Every game is prime time for SuperSport, the main broadcaster. And it's just a bit easier for them. They can spend more time at home and stay connected to their families. So that I was just enjoying that difference,
Are you because I could frame this both ways, are you a glass half full or a glass half empty person
Definitely full. I think my initial reaction is empty, actually, and then I have to check myself and go, no, we're going to look at this positively.
Yeah, I've got the question is, what are the challenges running a league across multiple countries? And you've now done it twice with the World Rallycross and now United's Rugby Championship. There obviously are challenges, but what are some of the opportunities that it does present working in multiple countries?
Yeah, you have that scale, you have that breadth, you have that ability to be relevant to multi-markets. And so, looking at it from a business perspective, you're not solely focused on one market. And that has pros and cons, right? That has the con, and the negative side is that you're not everything to that one market. You're something to that market. The pro is you're something to quite a lot of markets. And therefore, if you aggregate those together, you become pretty robust. Because, whether that's commercial, we have TV deals that are in 5 different markets. That makes the cumulative total makes us pretty substantial. No one market is bigger than France, for example, but accumulation of the different markets makes us competitive. From a sporting point of view, COVID was a nightmare, but obviously it was a nightmare for everybody. We were pretty robust. We played quite a lot of it through COVID, albeit to empty stadiums, which is a nightmare. But we found territories where we could operate. And so we played, for example, a final in Italy because they allowed us to come and bring the teams in a quarantined way. So it just gives you that flexibility to carry on going, that robustness, that toughness and resilience. But it has been very challenging being cross-border through COVID. So we wouldn't want to see those days return, I don't think. But it definitely gave us a sense that we've got a league that's strong.
And do you think, as the league develops and as those rivalries develop, you think those cross-country rivalries, even though they might be, a few games and, not every second week and those kind of things, will start to develop and you'll start getting a bit cohesion amongst the fans, internationally?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think that's the bit you've got to work really hard on with your broadcast partners. You've got to tell that story and create rivalries. I think when you get away wins, I've been a big fan of away wins, right? Because they don't happen that often in playoffs. In really meaningful games, away wins are hard, right? And that's why you create you create that system, don't you? You reward the teams that are higher up in the log stage or the league stage with home quarterfinals, a home semi-final stage, and that's because it's an advantage. In URC, what we've seen is actually quite a lot of away wins. And so away wins tends to create this fierce rivalry, because you've got someone like Munster going to Cape Town to a sellout stadium with 3,000 or 4,000 travelling support in a 56,000 sellout, and they humbled them. Right? That was not a great experience for Stormers. That was our final this year. Munster did the away win 6 games in a row. So I think you've got to work with those core ingredients, but then it's our job as tournament promoters and organisers, plus our broadcast partners, to amplify those messages and create those rivalries more readily and more quickly than maybe a league that's domestic and 100 years old, where that's happened over time. So we're very active in that space to create those rivalries and to amplify that as broadly as possible.
And what are some of the things you're doing as a league? Because, like you said there, you're working with your partners, the teams of partners, you've got different broadcast partners. How are you working as a league to amplify the best in all markets? Are there key initiatives you're doing across digital to sort of lift up all the teams and amplify the URC message?
Yeah, definitely. Every market has its own broadcaster, and we have free-to-air and free-to-air broadcasters in the UK and in Ireland. But then we have, Supersport in South Africa, which is a big old broadcaster who does incredible content. So we can create those stories around the teams. I think a big part of South Africa was introducing who are these European teams. They'd heard of Leinster, but they didn't really know they're a 4-time European champion sort of thing, and what that really means. So quite a lot of it is introducing the local market to the visiting teams. Quite a lot of content is produced on that basis. One of the key initiatives that we've got in rugby more globally, and this is because we have an investment partner now that spans actually different competitions. I sit here in London in an office with Premiership Rugby from England and Six Nations Rugby, which is the international game that sits above us. And that's because we have a common investor, which is CVC Capital. So we have a common investor. And a lot of that is, what can we do to drive this amazing game forward? A big part of that is players. Players have traditionally not really been seen to be above and beyond the team. And that's a core value, I think, of rugby. But at the same time, I believe you can have a team sport and star players. And if I can think about a way that my kids who are young, 8 and below, they gravitate towards athletes and players and star names. And rugby needs to create more of those, I think, to be more successful going forward. So the big part of what we do is called Players in Focus. It's a key initiative that we coordinate centrally, but our broadcast partners amplify and create content around, which is introducing, great storylines through the players. What are the players doing? Who are they? And we found some really surprising gems in there and told some amazing stories. So I think that's a really, really important way that rugby can grow, is through the player.
I mean, definitely, it's definitely a global trend where, we're seeing the football players like Messi, land in Miami, and you see all their social accounts grow because of the, behemoth that he is on a digital space. But, all the leagues are now, driving the players, and the players are, like you said, where young fans are drawn to. We recently had a panel at Money in Sport, which was the battle for new fans. I mean, other than, doing the player focus, what are you doing to seek out new fans? Because you've got that traditional rugby base of people who've grown up with the game and love the game. But how do you, what are some of the initiatives you're doing to attract, but maybe, your sons or younger kids, or, the younger fans that aren't, tuning into a TV broadcast, those kind of things? What are some of the things you're doing to attract new fans?
Yeah, you're right. I think you mentioned TV broadcast there, and that's quite an age-specific thing we found, right? It skews older, obviously. I think Gen Z and younger are watching sport. I mean, I know my kids love it, and they're absolutely obsessed with sport, almost to the point where I'm having to sort of get them to try and be involved in other things, right? Because it's so sort of pervasive here. The Premier League in England is very, very widely followed, obviously.
Yep.
But as I say, that word pervasive, it is almost everywhere that you look. There is something to do with football. And so other sports within the UK market in this instance needs to almost work harder to try and get that shelf space, to get the attention of those kids earlier. And it's everything. It's quite counterintuitive sometimes because it's physical. And my kids are into cards, trading card games. Okay, rugby doesn't have a trading card game. We need to be in that space. It's all the way through to the movement of that to a digital collectible. Again, rugby is not in that space. Formula One is. They'll gravitate towards that instead of rugby. But I think actually more broadly, and this is definitely seen within sport generally, is actually women. Women are not talked to in the right way about sport, and that's both women's sport, but also sort of traditional men's sport. And rugby, I think, is moving in a much better direction than most on that. We are seeing more, female attendance at games. We're seeing those numbers start to equalise. And, we were talking 80-20 before. Now they're starting to get more closer to parity. And that's so wide that the approach you need to take to generate a wider base that will come and support your teams, but also attend games, watch your content on social, and then ultimately either watch it on linear or subscribe to one of your paid broadcasters, right? That's a long old journey. You've got to take care of your fan base at each stage of that. So what we set up is a women's leadership academy, because we thought actually we don't actually have a women's league yet. We want to try and look at that in the future. But we employ some amazing women, and they actually set up an academy to create more roles for women in sport. And our view is if we keep doing that and we start to really be influenced by that, then actually we're going to create great content for women from women. And so that's a really interesting kind of process we've embarked on, which we're very proud of. But the women within our business have led that from start to finish, and we've just completed our first intake, and it was really successful. So we'll carry on doing that and offering opportunities to women in rugby and within the URC to come in and sort of shake things up a bit.
I mean, it's so important to get that diversity of opinion from multiple people. Say that, the way that you consume rugby, the way that, women are consuming rugby, the way that your kids are consuming rugby, it's completely different. And if you only have, that one track of this is what I expect, this is how I want my replay, this is how, then you are, you're leaving a whole swag of potential fans and customers, by the wayside. You did talk about, you touched on it a little bit, the impressive marks around your broadcast with 37 million and 1 million social followers, and attendance was up last season at 1.6 million. What were some of the key strategies and factors behind that? Was there a real appetite of, COVID's behind us and we want to go to live sport, which is a big catch-all, but were there particular things that you did to hit those marks?
I think the attendance one is probably one I'm most pleased about, because that has been quite slow to come back to pre-COVID levels, never mind sort of record levels for us. And I think a part of that was we did a lot more analysis of our fans and what their views were. And we employed a company called the Fan Experience Company, who went in and literally kind of rated all of our teams' experience on site, and then created a feedback sheet that said, if you did this, 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 and this, your NPS scores would go up. And we've tracked that over 2 years, and thankfully all our NPS scores are up. And I think those must be linked. I think if you're starting to create a better experience for your fans when they come to the game, they're going to come back more readily to those. What we were seeing is a lot of first-time attendees were not coming back again. And that's the bit that we wanted to fix. And I think we're starting to fix that. Some of the challenges you've got when you've got a lot of teams in different locations and lots of broadcasters is you can't always get that regular cadence of every other week there's a home game and it's on at the same time, and that appointment to view. So that is a constant moving piece for us. We're constantly trying to work with the very best we can. We're working with a company called Legalytics, who help you create as optimized a fixture list as possible for those sorts of things. We've been a lot more consultative with our clubs to try and find kickoff times that work for them more traditionally, where possible with our broadcasters, and put it at sort of fan-friendly kickoff times. And that's a constant sort of negotiation. It's a constant stress and strain. You're trying to, on one hand, allow your broadcasters to get really what they want. At the same time, you really need full stadiums to make it look great on broadcast. And so that's the negotiation you have. When you've had partners for a long time, that tends to be a lot easier. So, and this is, we've had our partners for a lot longer than we were previously, obviously. So, there's a real kind of sense of we're in this together. Let's try and make the best competition possible. So I think it's a combination of factors. And the fact we're sort of 2 years old as this brand, that just takes time to sink in. And I think we're now getting there. The brand's getting a lot better recognition scores. And we just got to keep on working on that, investing in that. And hopefully we'll see those metrics improve further. We invested a lot in content. We work with 50 Digital, and we're starting to do a lot more in-house now. We got some really smart people. I tried to basically hire as smart people as possible and keep them as long as possible, knowing some of the constraints that we've got. And they're just doing wonders, right? They're doing wonders. Our social media growth is exceptional. And there's loads more we can do, but it's getting those basics in place. And I think we're starting to get that now.
So with that foundation in place, some of and you have success, and we've worked with clients before where you have that big jump in numbers, and your growth numbers are kicking in, and most likely it's smart people doing cool things and fans getting on board, and you're tapping into the right piece, or the algorithms are pushing you at the right spot. How do you then set, after a really successful year and hitting all the marks, how do you set those KPIs and the strategy for next year? Like, you always want to be going up and you always want to be pushing forward. How do you keep raising the bar year on year?
Yeah, so that's a constant challenge as well, because which we have this year, we exceeded our targets for this year and partly next year already. You've got to reset, and you've got to set those. And a lot of this is management skills, right? But set those targets at a point where they're ambitious, where they push people, but they're not too far outside the realms of what's possible either. And it's getting those absolutely spot on. We actually work with a company called PSI, Prospect Sporting Insight, who try and link revenue growth targets to lots of different metrics, like audience growth or audience engagement or attendance. And they try and give us a formula each year that says, if you do this on attendance each year, or if you do this on social media growth, or if you do this on engagement, or if you do this on database growth, or, however many we've got, 10 or 15 of them, you should be able to earn those forecasts in 5 to 6 years' time. Most businesses like ours are based largely on media revenue, if you look as a percentage of our overall revenue. And obviously media revenue comes in cycles. And so we've got 2 years left of our current TV cycle. And you normally renew a year out or something like that, maybe slightly earlier. And so you can track your progress and plot your graph on what the competition needs to earn. Our competition makes money, and it effectively, cost base, we try and keep that cost base pretty solid and tight. The rest of it goes back to our investors, and our investors effectively are our clubs. So we have CVC as a minority investor, but the majority goes back to our clubs, and that's a really important part of their overall income for the year. For them to be competitive, they need the league to do well, and vice versa. For the league to do well, we need the clubs to do well. So we create those metrics of growth based upon, as much as we can, some science to it. If we calculate all those pieces, then we should be worth more in the future when we come to renew our TV deal and renew sponsorship deals and sell more tickets, etc. And then a lot of our job now is to create new revenue streams wherever we can. So we'll announce an NFT, digital collectible deal shortly, and we basically just need to keep on looking for new ways to generate revenue back for our clubs. And
the other part, of a league, like you said, your key partners are the clubs. Getting that balance right of controlling what you can control around the league and all the stories you can tell, and managing the partners, to also making sure that every club is coming on the same journey and no club is being left behind. How do you find that as a challenge from a league point of view to provide the clubs with support, but they are still running their own businesses, but you need everyone to reach a certain level?
Yeah, probably our one sort of core strength is that we've got a very close relationship with our clubs, and we've managed to borrow from, and this is on purpose, because I when I started, there were 3 members of staff. I was one of them. So we've now grown the team, and then growing the team out to say around 30 now, which isn't huge still, but it's significant for rugby competition like our own on our P&L. We've managed to bring people in who've got experience of the NRL in Australia, who've worked in the NRL. It's a competition we love and look at and think, actually, wouldn't that be great? If we could do certain things that they do, then I think rugby in this country would grow. We brought people in from the AFL, have experience working in the AFL in Australia. I've got people who've worked across tennis, who've worked across golf, worked in the NHL. And that's on purpose, right? Because what I'm trying to do is bring in all these experiences that they've had and go, right, what do we all like? What did you do? What experiences did you have that you liked? What did you not like? And how can we do a version of that ourselves? And we've set up a thing called collaboration labs with our clubs, collabs for short. And that's effectively like our Teambo MBA equivalent, centralized services, provide data insights to our clubs. And that for the first time ever, we'll have an aggregated data or understanding of who the fan base is. And that is really a proxy for how we're going to operate with our clubs going forward. It's going to be very reciprocal. We're going to help them, and then in us helping them, effectively the media rights become worth more. And it's a pretty straightforward equation at the end of the day to a media partner, especially if they're a pay media partner. It's how many fans can you bring them to subscribe to their channel? So the more information and data you know on your fan base in a certain market, the higher the valuation, effectively. So we've managed to strike that relationship with our clubs. But you're right, it's always a bit of a dialogue now and again about what rights are where, and are we sure that betting partner is a good idea or not, or and I think that's the same anyway in any business like ours, right? I don't think we're certainly not uncommon in that.
No, it is a bit of you're all working towards the same direction, but also you've got all the clubs running. They're all trying to win. They're trying to win the league. They're trying to be successful and can get every competitive advantage. So sometimes they don't want to run in the same direction, and it becomes a challenge from a league point of view to get everyone on the same page because they've got competing priorities because they all want to win.
Yeah, and actually, to be honest, I want them to win. Right? Yeah. I want them all to win. I mean, if you think about what we sell Jeopardy. We sell, the NFL mantra any given Sunday.
Yep.
The more disruption I get by team 8 beating team 1 on a quarterfinal, the better. Quite honestly, because it gives a vibrancy to the league. So, the fact that they're all trying to find a way to win, I've got to encourage that also, obviously within the rules. Because we are also a tournament organizer, right? We run the rules, right? We are both, both functions, the organizer and the commercial entity to help it sort of prosper. So I can't on one hand say, you guys should all work together and it shall be rosy in the garden, and then say, no, I need you all to win. So there's a balancing act, right? And hopefully we've got that relatively okay from a balance point of view.
And so, what's your focus for next season? Is there a theme or something you want to tackle or solve next season?
Yeah, we take this real kind of challenger brand approach because we are still, the third league in terms of revenue out of those that I mentioned. France is well ahead, really. The English Premiership is slightly ahead of us, and we're growing the fastest though. And so we've coined this phrase, "United we rise," to just give everybody a sense that we're in one boat together. And the more we can do together, commercially speaking, the better it will be. And, giving everybody that sense of journey, we are growing, we are rising together, I think is quite powerful. It's certainly something that our internal teams really got behind. It's a campaign that we'll see across our broadcasters. So he's managed to get our broadcasters to really embrace that as well. And I think that's just a cool place to be, is to be a challenger brand, I think, in my mind. Whoever coined the phrase is a genius, but you always act like you're a 1-point underdog. And, I love that. I love that mentality, and I think we'll continue to try and play on that.
And do you think positioning that, because, there's not a lot of fans that, wear the logo or the shield of the league. They're not a fan of the league. They're a fan of their team. But do you think sort of pushing that challenger brand from a league point of view and have someone that's, they love their team and they're going to support it, but they're also going to support their team in the league because they know it's going to, punch above its weight and do its best to push forward? Do you think you're going to get that support for the overall league and, getting people watching games that their team's not involved and start following the league a little bit harder if that campaign does come off?
I think so. I think so, because I think what we've got is this slightly unique scenario, which is the Champions Cup, right? So where we play against the French teams and English teams. So there's almost like a ladder on which league is most competitive in that environment, especially if the odds are against us commercially and financially. I think it's even more so. But and that's the idea, is to give everybody a sense of, one, knowing who the other teams are in our league and really kind of playing on that. And obviously, as I said earlier, that's a massive content stream for us. And then this gives a sense of it being one league. Because I think the Americans do it really well with the NFL, talking about a league structure that is sort of has its own life. The NBA does it really well. I think the NRL does it really well actually as well.
Yep.
You know, has a league structure, and obviously from a merchandising and licensing point of view, that has a value, that has a brand value to it because the official merchandise of that league. Okay, you're buying the team's crest and so on, and that shouldn't change. But this idea that actually the league can do well in the Champions Cup against the French and English teams is something that happens anyway. It's a little bit like the Ryder Cup.
Yep.
It's a little bit of a sense of that, where these individuals, these teams, come together for one mission, and that's to be the best. We would class the best in the world. And hopefully at some point, we've got planning, or we've got in planning, for a World Club Cup in rugby, right? Well, we will see who is the best in the world. Is it the Brumbies, or is it the Crusaders, or is it Leinster, or is it Toulouse? Yep. So we're busy trying to make that a reality from 2028 onwards. So we never stop. We always keep moving forward, keep innovating, keep growing, and challenging some of those norms is something that we do day in, day out.
You talked a little bit before, and I wanted to touch on it before we wrap up, is more and more of private investment into leagues, and teams. Even though, you've got teams as your investor, you've got the minority investor there. Does that change, I guess, your role, the demands, because the demands from teams is vastly different than, investors. Does that put different pressures on you as a CEO or trying to drive the league?
Yeah, I think I've been used to working for a really varied stakeholder group before, because even within the IMG context, I had teams who were effectively, the stakeholders within my motorsport business, but then I was reporting to private equity.
Yep.
From a business point of view. But I also had the FIA, which is a well-governing body. So I had different stakeholders, and that's no different now to before. So I have unions, the federations of rugby within each of our territories are the shareholders of the business. And they each either own or license the club. And then we have CVC. So, we have such a broad set of stakeholders who really matter. So I spend a lot of my time in meetings, a lot of my time at committees and boards, and we try to make sure that we rationalize those as much as possible. But there really is no other way of doing it. If you run a league where the clubs are stakeholders, they're not shareholders, then you need to treat them really, really carefully and bring them along on the journey and make them part of that journey. At the same time, my shareholders, my board members, are the unions and CVC. So I think just over time, I've learned to be able to try and communicate with them individually, but also then as a collective to try and set one vision, align behind that vision, and get their buy-in for us to go and achieve it. And so far, so good.
And do you think that the influx of private equity money has, sharpened the focus on the commercial side? Whereas, in past years, many moons ago, it would just be everyone would be the stewarding the game, and it would be all about the game, and the money would sort of just happen, and which is why some leagues or teams sort of fell over, collapsed on themselves. Do you think it's sort of that influx is starting to sharpen that commercial focus to say, well, these things need to happen to get that media deal, to get the returns that we need to look at sustainability? Yeah,
I think without that private investment coming in, it probably would have got to the answer, but a bit later, I would have thought, just a bit further down the line. I think private equity money coming in has just allowed us to get to the answer quicker, and the answer for us is about aggregation. The reason why I'm sitting in office here in London with what some might assume to be our competitors, the English Premiership, is because we're partners.
Yep.
We're in different markets. We're trying to grow the same sport. And the Six Nations is an international competition which our players play in. So we're doing loads, if you like, back office stuff together, whether that's content generation to the plumbing, as we call it, the website, social media platforms, etc., the data systems. You want to do all that together because public facing don't see that, right? Whereas some of the more public facing elements are a little bit more like, let's just wait and see how this operates. And I think we're starting to get to the point where maybe our media rights are a little bit more joined up, certainly internationally. And we'll see about sponsorship. That tends to be the last one that you join forces on. But it's all about aggregation for us. It's about being collaborative, not selling against each other. Right? There's plenty of competition out there for media rights, revenue, and sponsorship revenue, and ticketing revenue from fans. You don't need to compete against each other in the same sport.
Definitely. Well, Martin, I really do appreciate it. I want to get to the Sports Geek closing 5 before we finish up. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Do you know, because my family is sports mad, so I'm not sure I remember the first, but the first memorable one, the one where it was sort of imprinted on me, for a weird reason, which I'll tell you in a minute, is the FA Cup final in '88, which is the football. Yep. It was a Dave Beasant save for Wimbledon, the Crazy Gang, against John Aldridge, Liverpool, at the old Wembley, the Twin Towers. So, yeah, it was a pretty incredible experience. But the reason why I remember it so vividly was a slightly sort of inebriated fellow, I would say, relieving himself on the side of a wall as we were coming past. And as a kid, my mum's trying to guard me from this thing, and this big old riot horse comes along and sort of knocks him over. So, not the memory that that my parents probably thought it was going to be, but needless to say, it was a very memorable experience overall.
Definitely. Do you have a favourite food memory? Hopefully, it's not related to that one, or a go-to food when you go to a sports event these days.
So actually, I took my wife to go and see an NBA game at Madison Square Gardens, and we did a very American sort of hot dog chips. Yep. So I don't think you should be too posh at a sports event. Go get real, stay real. So it was hot dog and nachos at the Madison Square Garden with my wife, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, terrific. What's the first app you open in the morning with teams in different parts of the world? What's the first app you open in the morning?
This is probably relevant to just the UK audience, really, but the BBC Sports app, which is sort of a really cool app. Actually, I must give them credit. It's where all the latest sports is aggregated in a nice sort of friendly user experience. So I've got Man United that comes in there. So all the gossip that comes in on Man United. Yep. I've got all the motorsports stuff. I've got rugby. I've got everything on there. So it's probably my first port of call is opening that app. Much to my wife and my kids sort of get off your phone experience. But actually the kids want to use my phone instead of me. So BBC Sports app.
Terrific. Is there someone that you follow? It might be an author or a podcaster or a content creator or a colleague that the podcast listeners should give a follow to, and why?
Other than yourself, obviously. So
it's not a self-serving question, but I'll always take it.
Which I do love. I do love the show, by the way. So thank you for that. There's actually one, and you may already know, but Giles Morgan does a show called Are You Not Entertained?
Okay.
Giles was the head of sponsorship for HSBC for a long time. He's a great sort of orator. And he does a show, so Are You Not Entertained? Which is sort of a sports, entertainment, businessy podcast. It's really well done, actually. Get some great guests on there. So if you haven't heard of Giles and that, then I'd give it a listen.
Right, yeah. Well, we'll definitely put it in the show notes. Lastly, we ask, what social media platform is your MVP? And so you can answer it both personally. What's the platform that's your go-to, but then also what's the go-to platform for the United Rugby Championship?
So actually, and it's not my personal platform, but for the championship, we've just seen unbelievable growth on TikTok, which is great for us because that's, a much younger audience. Again, it's not me, so it's sort of, not my personal choice, but one that's worked really, really well for URC in this last year. And that's probably because it's crazy to say this about social media platforms, but more traditional Twitter follower, because I just find it a much easier kind of experience. I feel like it's already set up for how I consume. I get to the point quicker with Twitter, I think, than I do with other platforms.
You haven't come around to calling it X yet? You're still going to call it Twitter?
No. At the moment, it's still the blue bird on my phone, so I don't know whether it's just my phone.
Oh, no, sorry. You haven't updated your phone. It's going to be a big white X on a black background, and we're not allowed to say the word Twitter anymore. So it's going to be interesting to see where it lands. We're just all holding on for dear life.
I don't know. I'm fine with it, to be honest. I'm sure it will stay reasonably the same. Although I understand he's trying to go down a more payment provider route. But I would say for me, the way I follow my sports mainly and business is via Twitter or X. So haven't yet gone onto Threads properly, but let's see what happens in the future.
Definitely, it will be one to watch because effectively Threads is effectively the place that everyone's jumping to if they want to leave Twitter. And if you've already got an established Instagram audience, it's a nice landing spot because they effectively give you a bunch of those Insta followers. So it's going to be interesting. I think Threads only released, and there's not really that many pro sports running right now, other than baseball in the States. I think once the sports like the NFL and the NBA and NHL and some of the other big sports start using it regularly, I can see it, being another platform. But whether it's going to be the same as Twitter, who knows? But it's going to be interesting. Sure. I guess that's it for me. What if someone was to reach out, and I always ask them to reach out and say thank you, is there a platform that listeners can do that and say g'day and pose a question perhaps?
Yeah, no, definitely on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So please do it on there. I would love to hear from people on there. It tends to be pretty responsive, I hope, on that platform. It's one we've developed out a lot for our business purposes with URC. It's gone really, really well for us, and it's a cool environment to get some messages across from a company point of view. But I tend to use it personally as well.
Terrific. Well, Martin, I really do appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully,
pleasure.
I'll be in your part of the world sometime soon. I was hoping to get to Europe this summer, but it didn't come off. But maybe sometime soon, and maybe catch a URC game.
Please come and see us, and come visit the office when you're next up.
Will do. Thanks a lot.
Learn from the Sports Geek Amplify Season 2 cohort. Trajectory, Xtonet, SeatGeek, Sponsor CX, and Stats Perform. For more, go to sportsgeekamplify.com.
Thanks again to Martin. Send him a tweet, because really saying send someone an X doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Come on, Elon, get it sorted. If you're on Twitter still, send him a tweet. Martin Anayi is his handle, or send him a connection on LinkedIn. Tell him that you listened to the episode, what you enjoyed, especially if you are a fan of the URC and you're following. So please, reach out, as I ask everybody. If you've listened to an episode, please reach out to say thanks. I really do appreciate listeners reaching out to guests. Before I wrap up, back now from my trip to the US, Seat was a terrific success. Really enjoyed the reboot. Congrats to Josh, Barney and the team. And at Seat, I hosted a workshop. Rather than doing a panel or a keynote, I took on hosting a workshop, and with the title "Solving Digital's Biggest Problems." And really, what I did was I facilitated conversations around some of the issues that digital teams are facing, both from those that are in the room, but then also some that we discussed. And it was a really good way to get conversations going in the room. It was terrific to see people sharing successes and also sharing how they'd solved problems previously, and also unpacking some problems that we are finding as industry. And so if it's something, if you're in the room and you enjoyed it, I'd love to do it with your team, whether that happens on site or I can facilitate them via a video call. Built up that skill over the last couple of years, but can do it in both ways. It's a really good way to, recharge your team, get them thinking about problems in a different way and become problem solvers, not seeing all those roadblocks. So if you want to get your team up and running and working efficiently and moving some of those obstacles that you might have in your team, please give me a call or send me an email, Sean@SportsGeekHQ. Love to help you. And as I said, most times I'd love to help podcast listeners. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Looking to help your digital or sponsorship team? Book in for a Pick My Brain session with Sean Callanan to help your team level up. Book now at sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.